All right, I think we should get started. Welcome, everyone. This is the second of two public listening sessions with the Department of Fish and Game about Executive Order 618, Developing Biodiversity Goals for Massachusetts. To get us started, we're going to just go through some housekeeping. Julia Hopkins from the Department of Fish and Game, if you would review some logistics for us.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. I just want to go over a couple housekeeping items. Tonight's event is a Zoom webinar, which means you'll only be able to see our panelists and speakers, and you'll only be able to unmute with permission. What that means is when we are giving the presentation, you'll just see the speaker, and then we move into the public listening session portion, we'll give directions on how you can sign up to give feedback. Tonight, language interpretation is available in the following languages: Mandarin, Haitian Creole, Portuguese, Spanish, and Vietnamese. And at this time, I'm going to invite our interpreters to tell those who are attending how they can access language interpretation. So could we go quickly through these, and we'll just have our interpreters each give an introduction.
大家晚上好，大家如果需要中文、普通话翻译的话，我们有这个地球，你可以点进去，然后我们会有这个同声翻译，谢谢 ，Thank you.
Bonsoir, moi c'est Caroline. C'est jeudi à m'interpréter pour nous, ça va passer dans programme a fait à soir. Là, dit en bagage, m'a para l'interpréter pour nous en créole.
Oi, tudo bom? Eu sou Erzinete Borges, vou estar interpretando para a língua portuguesa. Se quiserem ouvir a tradução em português, vão ter que carregar no botão onde diz a língua portuguesa e eu vou estar traduzindo.
Muy buenas noches, mi nombre es Randolph Domínguez, voy a ser su intérprete del español el día de hoy. Para poder accesar esta reunión en el idioma español deben de buscar en la parte inferior de su pantalla un icono que parece un globo terráqueo, van a pulsar allí y van a seleccionar como idioma de preferencia el idioma español. Gracias.
Thank you. And could we have Vietnamese? Okay, at this time, I will start the interpretation channels, and it will be available at the bottom of the screen, so you may listen in all the other languages. And in addition, we have ASL and CART interpretation here tonight. So you should see ASL interpretation on your screen pinned, and you can access CART captions using the Show Captions button.
Se quiser comentar. Se preferir não falar em frente ao grupo, você pode submeter o seu comentário em escrito. Vão publicitar as instruções no chat. As instruções de como participar. Todos os comentários vão ser tratados iguais, oral ou escrito. O objetivo de hoje é escutar o feedback, ideias. Obrigado por estar aqui. É bom escutar e ver muitas pessoas aqui participando dessa sessão. Apreciamos a participação de todos. A missão é conservar a vida selvagem, as plantas e trabalharmos por o estado inteiro. Também fazemos programas educacionais à volta dos estados, vamos para escolas, apresentamos oportunidades técnicas, restauramos rios e providenciamos acessos públicos por mais de 300 rios à volta do país. Quero agradecer a todas as divisões pela contribuição e as outras agências e, claro, os parceiros que nos traz hoje aqui. Último setembro, a governadora de Massachusetts assinou uma ordem executiva 618. O nosso trabalho é apoiado por a governadora chamou-nos para fazer a nível de biodiversidade para sermos fortes. Vai falar agora a comissionária assistente. Depois vai abrir para o comentário público. Muito excitada por ter muita gente aqui. Começar por orientação, onde é que estamos nesse processo? Quando assinaram a ordem executiva,
know that here in Massachusetts, we stand on a strong foundation, and we are really thrilled to be taking these next steps, crafting strong and meaningful biodiversity conservation goals for the future. In fact, Governor Healey called on us to make the nation's strongest biodiversity protection goals. We look forward to hearing from you tonight, and we really thank you again for being here. And now I'm pleased to introduce Jen Ryan, our Assistant Commissioner, who will present to you again our work to date, and then we'll go into public comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner, and welcome everyone. It's so exciting to have so many people here. I thought I'd start with an orientation on where we are in this process. Last fall, after the executive order was signed, departments set up a working group with members of the 4 divisions: mass wildlife, fishing and boating access, ecological restoration, and marine fisheries. This team worked through existing data and policies and developed a draft framework, themes, and goals. We've taken this work to other agencies and branches of the administration. We've held 2 biodiversity workshops, one with conservation organizations, commercial fisheries, hunting and fishing, and academics, and one with our sister environmental agencies, including the Department of Conservation and Recreation, Agricultural Resources, Environmental Protection, and others. We've also given similar presentations in different venues and are reaching out to engage environmental justice groups and tribes as the public process develops. This brings us to today's listening session. And I want to reiterate again that you can have an impact in shaping these goals and themes. We look forward to incorporating feedback, continued engagement and analysis, and anticipate a report to the governor this fall. The release of the report will kick off our statewide ongoing biodiversity initiative, which will be grounded in the recognition that healthy biodiversity benefits us all, be it in the cities or forests, and we all have a role to play: individuals, towns and municipalities, the state, and organizations. And as we work towards 2030, 2040, and 2050, as the executive order calls for, this will be an open and ongoing process that welcomes input. So to start, what is biodiversity? It's life on Earth. It's part of nature that has inherent value, is intertwined with history and culture, sustains our health and economy, and enriches our quality of life. And why biodiversity goals? At its most simple, focused biodiversity measures are a lens through which to understand and support the health of our environment and a pathway to work together for a better future. And biodiversity is not just parks and wild places. It is all around us, and the majority of Massachusetts residents live in urban areas. Biodiversity is part of what makes our time outdoors so enjoyable, no matter where we are, and what makes lack of trees and green spaces so notable. Biodiverse green spaces contribute to community wellness, and there are tools available to understand where there is access to green spaces and where there isn't, and thus to guide investment and policy. And that is an important part of this story. So how does biodiversity support the health of our environment? It's the foundation for clean air and water, human health, outdoor recreation, agriculture and food security, sustainable fisheries, and sustainably managed forest products. Biodiversity measures help us to understand our impacts on the environment. For example, water pollution and overuse are directly related to local biodiversity, from the microscopic to what we can see. And restoring biodiversity hotspots, such as wetlands, salt marshes, and marine eelgrass beds, increase their ability to both capture and store carbon, as well as support the plants and animals that live there. So there are many threats to biodiversity, including pollution, habitat loss, invasive species, and habitat fragmentation. All are exacerbated by climate change and felt more keenly in environmental justice neighborhoods. In Massachusetts, 50% of our inland waters are considered impaired under the Clean Water Act, and over 30% of historic wetlands are gone. Over 2,000 river miles are impaired for aquatic health, according to the Environmental Protection Agency. And between 2013 and 2019, Massachusetts experienced approximately 4,000 acres of net forest loss per year. And biodiversity in crisis. According to the Department of the Interior, both globally and nationally, scientists are sounding the alarm about a catastrophic extinction crisis that threatens the biodiversity of our planet and the health of our natural systems that supply our food, water, and other resources. In the US, approximately 12,000 wildlife species need conservation assistance to avoid the threat of extinction. The disappearance of bees and other pollinators is reducing crop yields and threatens food security. Already, there are 3 billion fewer birds in North America than there were 50 years ago. In Massachusetts, over 430 species are at risk and protected under the State Endangered Species Act, and the State Wildlife Plan names 540 species of greatest conservation need. But when we focus, we can make a difference. Protecting and restoring habitats, removing invasive species, cleaning up pollution, including reducing pesticides and eliminating single-use plastics, works. Boston Harbor cleanup is a famous example. The return of peregrine falcons in Massachusetts is another. Pollinator trails and gardens support monarch butterflies, bees, and more. And when we remove old dams, the fish return and the river heals. We are dramatically enhancing North Atlantic right whale conservation efforts right now by partnering with commercial fisheries to develop weak rope to reduce entanglement risk, advocating for policy changes that reduce abandoned fishing gear in our oceans, and using federal funds to invest in acoustic monitoring technology to better understand where the whales are in real time, reducing the risk of ship strikes and entanglements. So recognizing that focused efforts are necessary, we see international, national, and state action to develop and further biodiversity-related goals. The European Union has a strategy, as does the United Nations, and states such as California, Vermont, and Maryland. The U.S. Department of Interior has America the Beautiful, calling on 30% of U.S. lands and waters to be conserved by 2030 in order to give every person in America, present and future, the chance to experience and enjoy our nation's rich and vibrant lands and waters. This brings us to the Massachusetts Vision 2050 for biodiversity, where we seek to protect, restore, sustain, and connect, developing actions that can be taken by the state, be it convening like now, providing direction through goals, policy, law, and regulation, providing training and technical assistance and funding, to supporting municipalities and community organizations, and identifying and supporting actions each person can take. Our first theme is conserving important lands and waters to ensure key species thrive and ecosystems function. These goals include a range of protections, from rare species habitats to natural and working lands and coastal areas, including salt marshes and eelgrass beds. Our first priority is meeting the Commonwealth's goal to protect 30% of lands and waters by 2030. We are close, but it will take a concerted effort to get there. The Biodiversity EO focuses these efforts on areas that are critical for biodiversity and recognizes our role in protecting globally rare biodiversity hotspots, such as coastal plain ponds and pine barrens, and also includes setting active management goals for forest biodiversity. Under Make Room to Move, connections and habitat corridors to restore migration pathways and support climate migration. Did you know that Massachusetts has one of the highest number of dams per river mile in the country? It's a legacy of our colonial and industrial past, and most of these dams no longer serve a purpose, are expensive to maintain, and are associated with liability as risk, as well as have a negative impact on wildlife. Rivers are some of the most biodiverse places on Earth, and free-flowing rivers corridors are home to a richer array of plants and animals than impoundments. With roughly 3,000 dams in Massachusetts today, taking out 300 is 10%, and by focusing on the most important for fish and ensuring we take action to address dangerous failing dams and culverts, we can make an outsized benefit for nature. And right-sizing culverts both improves wildlife habitat and municipal budgets. They are both large enough for aquatic life to move through and are also less likely to wash out in big storms. These types of historic human interventions in the landscapes, dams and culverts, need to be addressed, and evolving permitting structures and providing funding to meet these goals is key. The blue economy is very important in Massachusetts. Restoring most productive fish nurseries is both good for biodiversity and for sustainable commercial and recreational fisheries. We can work with partners, agencies, and existing commissions and boards and other groups to help implement goals around actions such as eelgrass bed protections to get the best results possible, identify where more data and resources are needed, and target investments. We are also developing tools and policy to provide incentives and evolve regulatory structures to restore salt marshes, which support fisheries, protects the coast, and protects threatened species, including the salt marsh sparrow. Green planning and design for people and nature. Part of our work is to develop criteria and tools to avoid impacts to important habitats and landscapes, inform housing, transportation, and energy goals and projects, and better manage our limited freshwater resources. This can also include using native plantings and efforts to reduce light pollution, both at the state and municipal level. Food security and sustainable harvest. A healthy planet feeds us, both the land and the ocean. Farms also support biodiversity through healthy soils, practices, pollinator edges, and maintaining genetic diversity of crops. In addition to sustainable fisheries management, Mass Wildlife is working to increase hunters' share of the harvest, where venison is donated to food banks, and exploring launching Share the Catch for ocean-caught fish. Nature in the classroom. We are all born with the wonder of the world around us. We are proposing a Nature in Our Schools initiative to support an inherent appreciation for and belonging to nature from a young age. And we also recognize the importance of programs for people of all ages. Workforce is key to the restoration and education work to be done, and we are identifying pathways for climate and biodiversity jobs, which includes jobs like those in river restoration, habitat management, and outdoor education. How can we provide hands-on experience and opportunities to work different places and learn? And finally, nature in our neighborhoods. A theme that runs through our work is that everyone should have access to biodiverse green spaces, and what we do at home and in our communities matters, and in fact matters a lot. How can we support local action like backyard growers, providing municipalities with toolkits with guidance on light pollution and salt use, native plantings and pollinator plans, and better water management, and build the future where we all understand how we can work together to better support biodiversity. And with that, I'll say that what I've just presented are examples of emerging goals and themes around biodiversity, habitat protection, restoration, and local action. And thank you for listening. We look forward to hearing what you think, what you'd like to see more of, and what's missing. We have the public comment period, but this will be ongoing, and we welcome continued input. 2030 is close, but 2050 is many years away. What do we need to do now to build for the long term? Written comments can be submitted by the instructions on the screen. And if you stay for comment, you'll be called on if you raise your hand, but feel free just to listen. Thank you again. And with that, I'll turn it over to Stacy, who will facilitate public comment.
Great. Thank you so much, Jen. So I'd just like to offer a few ground rules to let you know how the public comment section will function. So as you can see, you can use the raise your hand button to sign up. That should be down in the bottom of your screen under reactions. It may just be on its own as raise hand, or you may have to go under reactions to find it. I will call on people in the order I see their hands. I'm going to do my best to pronounce your name as it is written. My apologies in advance if I mispronounce it. When it is your turn, we will unmute you to speak. We can't require that speech be courteous and respectful, but we can request it. And our presenters and all of your fellow attendees will greatly appreciate it. You will have up to 3 minutes to offer your comments. You will see when we start comments, there will be a small timer that will appear in the upper right-hand corner of the Zoom on your screen. Please begin to wrap your answers or your comments prior to that going down to 0. And at that time, you'll hear a little sound, and we'll ask you to finish up and ultimately remute you to make sure that there's time for other people to speak. You may have questions or you may have comments that you want responses for. This is unfortunately not that space. The agency is really, all of our agency partners here are going to be in listening mode. They're not going to be able to respond to any questions or to comments, but do feel free to raise your questions or put them in writing at the survey or through your written comments. And the agency is going to do their best to answer questions as the process is going on. We ask all of our commenters to please speak slowly so that interpreters are able to keep up. And just a reminder that all the comments are going to be treated equally, whether you present them orally here or whether you give them in writing. We do ask you to please try to focus your comments on the themes that you heard or on concerns about biodiversity in general. And as specific as you can be, it is most welcome. So with that, I'm going to turn over to our attendee list and the hands that are up, and we will begin. Ellen Fine with you.
Yes, thank you for taking my comments. My name is Ellen Fine. I live in Needham, Massachusetts, obviously, and I grew up here. Unfortunately, I have seen a trend over the past several years of an incredible increase, actually it's prolific use of lawn pesticides, lawn and horticultural. And unfortunately, as we all know, it's very detrimental to the biodiversity. I don't even have a lawn anymore. I have pollinator gardens. I grow food, and I have such an abundance of wildlife on my property. But of course, my neighbors do not, and they're using all kinds of chemicals. I've worked for years within the system, coalescing with groups like NOFA. I run the Resiliency Gardens Project, CEG Food Bags, Healthy Yards Need 'em, Pollinator Protectors, and we worked really hard to create policy as well as laws change about pesticides. And I think it's often like the elephant in the room. I think that when I'm looking at all of these pictures here, the frogs, the monarchs, certainly, the plants, the birds, it's so important for us to have as a goal to eliminate the use of lawn pesticides as we go forward. But not only that, teaching folks, modeling for people, providing funds for people to shift their yards over to meadow gardens, pollinator gardens, growing food, whatever it is, rain berm gardens. I think that this could really be amazing for Massachusetts. We're already several decades behind, 7 or 8 provinces in Canada, many cities in Maine, including Portland, South Portland, Maryland, like entire counties where they've banned lawn pesticides. And when you ban those pesticides, which includes herbicides, fungicides, and the whole thing, you will naturally increase biodiversity. But also creating habitat will obviously do that as well. And I would love to work with this department because unfortunately MDAR never met a pesticide that they don't embrace, and they refuse to actually act on thousands of requests to reduce and eliminate pesticides, and certainly in lawn care. So I thank you for listening very much, and I hope that we are able to, as a Commonwealth, to really, really, really move forward on this. It's so important for the raptors, which are dying at incredible rates because of the rat poisons as well. Thank you very much. I appreciate your listening.
Thank you, Ellen. Janet Jensen.
Hi.
We heard you and then you muted yourself again, Janet. Try again.
Here we go.
There you go.
Thank you for taking my question. I heartily concur with everything that the last speaker just spoke about. There's a tremendous momentum right now for native plants, converting lawns, etc. But we got to get the pesticides out. But I want to address another issue that I didn't hear brought up, which is also incredibly important, and that's preserving the dark sky. You know, the world exists in 2 shifts, the day shift and the night shift. And most of nature requires nighttime, either for their activities or for their sleeping and whatever. But we are losing the darkness at a rate of 10% per year, I believe, since the introduction and widespread use of LED lights. You know, they can be incredibly powerful. And this this is a very tractable problem. There's less intense lights. It's a real issue of educating people not to create light pollution and to light up only where light is needed. There is a bill in the Massachusetts legislature right now, a House and Senate bill, that the Massachusetts dark chapter of the Dark Sky organization has been trying to get through for like more than 20 years, many sessions. And there's really no reason not to adopt it. There's problems with light for human health, human safety, wildlife. So it just encompasses a range of things. So I would just make a plea to really consider light pollution and dark sky legislation and making that part of this overall program. Thank you.
Thanks, Janet. Beth Cassoni.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you, Commissioner Shea. Thank you, Assistant Commissioner Ryan. My name is Beth Cassoni, and I'm the Executive Director for the Massachusetts Lobstermen's Association, which I will call MLA. That's a mouthful. The MLA has worked closely with the Massachusetts Division of Marine Fisheries since its inception in 1963 to protect the ecosystem and resources our members depend upon to earn a living. The MLA is continually engaged in all things ocean related to ensure the ecosystem is protected, as well as the species that are highly managed by the Division of Marine Fisheries to safeguard sustainability and resiliency. The MLA advocates to protect all eelgrass beds, and is engaged in marine debris cleanups and many other ocean-related endeavors. The numerous marine debris species that are responsibly and sustainably harvested from the Commonwealth's waters are highly migratory and travel beyond the Commonwealth's management area. Whereas there is not one commercial fishing gear type in the Commonwealth that is not subject to seasonal closures for one reason or another. Currently, the Massachusetts commercial lobstermen are beheld to the most restrictive regulations to protect the right whales anywhere in the United States. With a 3-month closure to over 12,000 square miles, the Massachusetts commercial lobstermen have adjusted their businesses to absorb this 5-month economic loss, as it takes 1 month on either end of the closure to set and remove their gear. When we talk about biodiversity and what this means, we believe Massachusetts is leading the way and is a leader in biodiversity, making great strides to protect many species, such as the right whale. With every conservation regulation change, the commercial lobstermen continue to comply at their own expense. It must be noted that the compliance rate in Massachusetts is upwards of 93% for the commercial lobster industry. In closing, we would ask that the Commonwealth have direct and in-person meetings with the commercial fishing industry, as their livelihoods depend upon the smart, conscientious, and well laid out planning when talking about biodiversity in the ocean. Thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you, Beth. Luke Sawitsky.
Great, thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Excellent, thank you very much. So obviously I'm Luke Sawitsky. I am a principal at See Ahead. We are an innovation company based in Kendall Square in Cambridge, Massachusetts. We are focusing on early stage startups that operate in the blue economy. So everything from fisheries, aquaculture, cultural resilience, offshore renewable energy. If you're an early stage startup and you have to do with the ocean and you are focused on a positive, sustainable outcome as part of your business model, please reach out to us. Personally, my background is also as someone who comes from commercial fisheries. I have worked in commercial fisheries both in the Commonwealth and elsewhere in North America for several years. It's very great to see that the Commonwealth is taking such a forward-looking stance on biodiversity. And I will say that there are many startups that we see across a variety of different disciplines who are really eager to engage in this space. And I think that there's a lot of business-oriented and market-oriented solutions that could really be successful in promoting biodiversity. And I would encourage the Commonwealth to think about how do you promote a system of incentives that is kind of self-sustaining. So currently you see there is a myriad of different regulations around coastal development, coastal interventions, looking at things like you're mentioning eelgrass. That is this great promoter of biodiversity, but it is not in a vacuum. you're talking about nitrogen pollution, you're talking about other use cases, anchoring vessels. And so one thing I would say is that I would encourage the Commonwealth to consider how they can change things like tax structures, incentivizations, the regulatory environment to promote nature positive solutions and incentivize both commercial owners and residential landowners to take interventions and really have a situation where if you are an innovator and if you are an entrepreneur and you do have a nature positive solution, the Commonwealth can be a place where you can actually go to market first and where you can create a situation where we can leverage the universities, the students, the scientific research, and everything that makes Massachusetts such a leader in so many areas and deploy it here first. That is really what we're focused on here at SeaHead, and I'm very encouraged by what I've heard here. And I look forward to working within the Commonwealth and with the Commonwealth to bring this about. But I will say that there is definitely some work that needs to be done in reducing red tape and making sure that everything is still nature positive and has a positive outcome. But really, I think that what we have been doing in the past, as we have identified, is not really getting it done. And there is a better way of turning the boat and really making it so that the Commonwealth can be a leader in finding solutions for promoting biodiversity as we move forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks, Luke. Matthew Sisk. That's the sound we hear when time is up. Thank you.
Good evening. My name's Matthew Sisk of Braintree. I'm also a member of the Fisheries and Wildlife Board, and I don't want to take up too much time tonight. I just wanted to, my comments tonight were that I wanted to applaud the administration on such a bold initiative, and I also wanted to recognize the staff that's working at all of the sub-agencies at the Department of Fish and Game. They have been fully engaged in this endeavor, in addition to doing their regular jobs that are both are so important. And I wanted the public who was listening tonight to know that they are getting a great service from the employees. And I look forward to the rolling out of this and working with all of you. Thank you, Commissioner O'Shea and Assistant Commissioner Ryan.
Thank you, Matthew. Christina White.
Hello, my name is Christina White. I am so glad that Massachusetts is working towards biodiversity plans. I live in Northampton, Massachusetts, and am part of a group. Northampton just passed a new ordinance about lighting in and regulation. So I'm also talking about light pollution. Biodiversity has many challenges, and light pollution is a part of the puzzle. I like to describe light pollution as the low-hanging fruit. You turn it off and it's gone. So it's easier than plastics or carbon or other challenges. But it's also really easy for people to forget about it. They leave their lights on and then they go inside and it's dark inside. And technology has allowed us to make brighter and lighter, and there's a perception of safety with brighter lights, but when it's really looked at, it's not true. Lights that are warmer and dimmer actually allow all of us to retain our night vision and see better in the dark. Light pollution has many detrimental health effects on plants, on insects, on birds, on migrating birds, on reptiles like sea turtles, on mammals, including humans. There's associations with breast cancer and autoimmune diseases. It's both primary from artificial light and secondary due to poor sleep. Light pollution affects pollinators, some of which are nocturnal. And so it's really important for us, as a previous person commented, there was a push to have dark sky legislation, which is really important for Massachusetts. There's a whole concept of light trespass that most people aren't familiar with, but that means that light can affect us all. So I hope that you will take into account light pollution as you're thinking about how to best address biodiversity. And I'm really pleased that you are addressing this. Thank you.
Thanks, Christina. Liz Thompson.
Hi, my name is Liz Thompson, and I work with NEC Solar and have been an environmentalist since I was a teenager. I'm now 60, so a long time. I have a few things that I wanted to talk about, but the first one discusses solar and how the legislation is written and that we're losing a lot of our forest to clear cutting to set solar when we have a number of places we can put solar other than cutting down our forests. It seems counterproductive to me to destroy something that sequesters carbon and also has biodiversity and everything to put solar up when we have millions of roofs in Massachusetts that you can put solar on. So that's someone in the industry for 10 years that financially can gain from this clear cutting, but I am against it, and as most of my colleagues are as well. So I wanted to make sure that that's, people in the industry want this to change. The other big thing about biodiversity is the Pine Barrens. We're losing biodiversity there from people, again, citing solar and also removing earth and sand. So I'm hoping that the Commonwealth will address that. My big thing is I'm also interested in the Dark Skies Initiative. I encourage everyone to look at that website and see if there's something that they can change in their own life. Very easy changes. The other thing is I want people to look at the fact that they don't necessarily need to mow down the sides of the highways, because there are a lot of native plants there that pollinators of all types, day and night, can use. So I think that's a waste of energy. But my big thing is trees. I don't understand how developers are allowed to come in repeatedly. My partner lives in Needham and clear cut all these sites for new homes, and we're losing so many trees, and especially large trees. So I was wondering if they could focus on trying to save some of these trees by having tree ordinances, and also saving the mother trees. That's really important. Also, I don't understand with these buildings. It seems like even though we have things, for wetlands, we're losing a lot of our wetlands because of development. And it seems like it doesn't matter that we have these laws on the book. So I just hope that when you guys are doing this, you pay attention to these things. I think they're really important because it's all connected. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Liz. Frances Mand. You should be able to unmute yourself.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Before we begin to develop biodiversity conservation goals for the next 5, 15, and 25 years, I believe we need to acknowledge the environmental riches we have squandered over the last 50 years. This was not a matter of ignorance, it was a matter of choice. I live in a community which boasts of having over 450 ponds, 36 of which are coastal plain ponds, where rare species of flowers and animals, the literature says, can be found in abundance. Today, most of these ponds are surrounded by development and polluted from fertilizers and septic systems. My community has several dozen vernal pools, at least on paper. In reality, most are dried up, cut off, and devoid of the unique species that depend on their seasonal fluctuations. My community has 3 designated ACEC, areas of critical environmental concern, but only one of which has been spared from residential sprawl. My community has an abundant supply of fresh water from an immense sand-based sole source aquifer, and yet we allow the woodlands that protect that water from contamination to be clear-cut, the topsoil and the sand itself to be hauled away. 50 years ago, we identified these resources, we mapped their locations, and then we remained silent when their importance was dismissed, their species eliminated. If the goal is truly biodiversity, we must immediately begin to protect what remains and restore what can be restored. Biodiversity cannot wait. Thank you.
Thank you, Francis. And just a reminder to please just state your name and affiliation. Bettina Abe.
Hello, thank you so much. My name is Bettina Abe and I live in Acton, Mass. Thank you so much for your work, everyone. Our fresh surface water resources like rivers, streams, ponds, lakes, swamps, and salt marshes are threatened by excess nutrients that come from flush toilets, septic systems, and leaching fields and municipal sewer systems. I believe that our state and federal governments should explore options for incinerating toilets, understanding that power outages are a threat to public health, rendering incinerating toilets non-functional. Perhaps there can be a combination of both flush and incinerating toilets in homes and all buildings. Perhaps Massachusetts environmental departments could partner with MIT, other colleges, universities, and engineering innovators and companies to develop the technology and a system that could reduce the quantity of precious potable water that we flush away every day without a thought. Clean water is a precious resource. If every household cut water flushes by 50%, that would do a lot to reduce excess nutrients and excess fresh water effluent infiltrating salt marshes and reducing their salinity. There are incinerating electric toilet products on the market now, but there are some hurdles and complications that need to be figured out, such as what to do with the clean ash post-waste incineration on a large scale. That has to be worked out. So I don't ever hear anything about this in the news or pretty much in any of all of the different environmental resources that I'm involved with and monitor every day. So I think it would be really cool if somebody could put together perhaps a study panel on this to research some ways to come up with alternatives to the fresh water toilets. Thank you.
Thank you. M. Becker.
Hi there, my name is Miri Becker. I am a supervisor on the Middlesex County Conservation District, and I live in Lexington. And I just want to say that it might be awesome to try and support our conservation districts in order to help with education, outreach, and even resources for people who are interested in participating in conservation efforts in their neighborhoods or at their homes. Because we do a lot of stuff to try and teach people about conservation, but we are really limited by resources. You know, we only have volunteer hours and one staff person who works part-time. And we could do so much more with more resources. It would really help us. Right now, we're doing a native plant sale and trying to teach people about the importance of native plants and, you know, avoiding pesticides in our landscapes like neonicotinoids that affect pollinators. My background's in landscape design, and that's one of the big issues that I saw is the use of pesticides in these landscapes that surround our homes and therefore reduce biodiversity. And if we are able to increase biodiversity in people's homes, that's a lot of space. So yeah, I would just really recommend trying to reach out to conservation districts and see if there might be partnerships that can be made. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Sherry Heller.
Hi, thank you for taking my comments. I'm Charles Heller. I live in Plymouth. I am the president of the Southeastern Massachusetts Pine Barrens Alliance, and I'm a co-founder of the Massachusetts Horseshoe Crab Collaborative. Last spring, the collaborative submitted a proposal to state list horseshoe crabs as a special concern species, knowing that horseshoe crabs are a keystone species and are disappearing from many beaches in the Commonwealth, where they were once so plentiful they were considered a nuisance. The International Union for the Conservation of Nature's website states, and I quote, "The horseshoe crab is a critical link to coastal biodiversity. One of their ecological functions is to lay millions of eggs on beaches to feed shorebirds, fish, and other wildlife. Unfortunately, this ecological link can be broken in areas where population density is low," end quote. SEMPA has been surveying horseshoe crabs on Long Beach in Plymouth as part of the Division of Marine Fisheries Spawning Horseshoe Crab Survey Program for several years. Every year, we see fewer and fewer horseshoe crabs. We intend to submit a proposal to close 3 connected historic horseshoe crab spawning and nursery areas on the western side of Cape Cod Bay. Those are Duxbury Bay, Kingston Bay, and Plymouth Bay. These 3 bays were noted by the Division of Marine Fisheries in 2004 as major spawning beaches and listed by the Division of Marine Fisheries in 2007 as high for horseshoe crab nurseries. These 3 bays have seen horseshoe crab numbers plummet over the past 25 years. Yet still a small fraction of horseshoe crabs return each spring to spawn there. Each of these bays has the potential to rebuild their horseshoe crab populations if the Division of Marine Fisheries would close these 3 bays to horseshoe crab harvesting, and if the Commonwealth would invest in additional coastal restoration projects. We would like the Department of Fish and Game to create a horseshoe crab refuge on the western side of Cape Cod Bay and support horseshoe crab habitat restoration efforts in Kingston, Duxbury, and Plymouth Bays. Thank you for taking my comments.
Thank you. Thank you, Cheryl. Cynthia Knapp.
All right, I'm unmuted now. Hi, I'm Cynthia Knapp. I'm from Littleton, Massachusetts, and I'm very interested in pollinators. Made my yard into a bit of a rewilding experiment, but like one of our former speakers, I see neighbors bringing in companies to do all manner of spraying with pesticides and other things. So I've done some research in the past on this, and I understand there's a law on the book that says anybody that's in that business, and in fact, anybody doing that spraying commercially must be licensed. My own experience, and I've spoken to quite a few of these people who are actually doing the spraying, is they don't know anything about the licensing, don't have the license, all right? And so the way that they're spraying is the worst possible, just like right into the air. So, you know, I certainly would like to see pesticides banned. I do think that there's a challenge here because, you know, there are these mosquito-borne illnesses that I think spook people a lot. So I think there needs to be some greater understanding of that, and what are some environmentally kind ways of approaching that problem, because people in their homes and yards, it's like, oh, that's a bad thing, so I must spray. So, you know, short of banning the spraying at all, I do think the law on the books needs to be enforced. And in my opinion, the entity to do that enforcement are the towns themselves, and that the towns should be educated and empowered to make sure that anybody doing any kind of spraying is properly licensed. You know, these private people that go around to the homes and they literally go door to door, hanging door knockers saying, we're spraying in the area, do you want to be sprayed too? Oh, horror, horror, if they're, you know, with the mosquitoes and the mosquito-borne illnesses. And so I think that people in towns could you know, have a way, they need to have a way to challenge, are these businesses doing it legally? Have they been licensed? And if they're not, then fines should be levied, and those fines used to educate the public. I think it might be good to have a cash flow going to educate the public about nature-friendly solutions.
All right, thank you so much, Cynthia. All right, Raymond Hebert.
Am I on?
You are.
I'm Ray Hebert with the Cape Cod Museum of Natural History, and I attended the first seminar and I came back for seconds because I was so impressed with the work you guys are doing. We partnered with the Fish and Wildlife Division down in Bourne. We're doing some bird banding there, and we're working with some habitat restoration with our land trust. We also partner with a place up in New Hampshire called the Butterfly and Caterpillar Lab. And one of the things that we had during one of our workshops was we were talking about meadows and how we can increase our meadows, our clear spots. And one of the folks in the group said, you know, we have plenty of meadows if we would just stop putting herbicides on them, and that's under the power lines. And he brought to me some information from, I think it was Ohio, and they have a statewide push to get the public utilities to take on a little bit more stewardship in terms of controlling the growths underneath these power lines by planting native plants and pollinator pathways, which literally would, there are several monarchs as well as painted ladies that do migrate along these pathways. And by having pathways of pollinators, they can follow this pathway back to Mexico, et cetera. So I was just wondering if there was a way to have the public utilities institutions at the state level partner with the Fish and Wildlife to raise the awareness of the resources that we're not using underneath these power lines. We have a local food pantry down here in Harwich, which is actually using the land underneath the power lines, which are right-of-ways, to grow food for the local food pantry, fresh food. And there are things like that that we can do that are positive. They're not regulated. They're not, you know, forcing people to do something. I think these are just opportunities just waiting to open up. So I would hope that we would do something like that with the and that goes for the aqueducts and the gas lines. There are all kinds of corridors of pathways that we could use to increase our level of diversity as far as pollinators go. Thank you.
Thank you. Brittany Ebeling.
Deputy Director at Berkshire Environmental Action Team, or BEAT, based in Pittsfield, Massachusetts. Among other things, we work toward keeping our river ecosystems clean, cold, and connected. I want to commend the efforts of the department to incorporate these biodiversity goals into your portfolio of work, especially your efforts to educate the next generation of environmental stewards. However, we would like to draw attention to an activity of mass wildlife which contradicts the department's stated biodiversity goals. The practice of fish stocking non-native fish results in massive pollution in the form of fish which are slated to die. According to Mass Wildlife's own description, nearly all of these stocked non-native fish do not survive, and when they die, they produce ill effects in the form of nutrient loading. As for the small percentage of these non-native stocked fish that do survive, they outcompete native fish species with reverberating harmful effects on the surrounding ecosystems. The Center for Biological Diversity notes many adverse effects of fish stocking non-native species on bird populations, for example. Not only is fish stocking of this sort funded by taxpayer dollars, taxpayers ultimately pay for efforts to reduce and clean up the effects of nutrient loading in the form of government-funded grant programs to nonprofits like ours, which work on issues of river pollution and maintaining healthy ecosystems. And as we know, nutrient loading in any one location along a river system affects the whole watershed. And this practice, which harms local biodiversity, likewise has ill effects on downstream ecosystems as well. We ask that, in keeping with the governor's executive order and the department's own mandate, Fish and Game halt the practice of stocking non-native fish in Massachusetts. Thank you.
Thanks, Brittany. Connor McKierney.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Hello, I'm a private citizen in Medford, Massachusetts, and I would like to say a few words. This is unscripted, but I'm personally interested in the work that is being done. I have worked on a small biodiversity project in Pennsylvania, and I wanted to bring some of my learnings here. And I have 3 large points. First, I think that it's fantastic that there is a part of your platform which is focused on assisted migration. Climate change is going to change the temperature and weather patterns throughout the world. And a lot of these efforts don't reflect that. I think working at a regional capacity, working with the states, especially more southern states, to source seeds and to source potential populations for introduction into Massachusetts is going to be an important part of protecting the biodiversity of the country and the world as a whole. And I'm glad that you already have this on your map. Second, I think it's also important to work towards bioabundance metrics. As a previous speaker noted, for example, horseshoe crabs are a keystone species, and although they are not extremely uncommon, their shrinking numbers are affecting numerous other populations which are uncommon. And beyond that, having a focus on bioabundance, that is wild animals in large abundance, will support countless other relations within the ecosystem. These systems are extraordinarily complex and we don't understand them completely. So having an interest in bioabundance is also important, and I think is poorly reflected throughout the literature and throughout these goals. And finally, I want to speak on lawn removal and native plantings. I think that it is great that you have in your platform bringing home some of this conservation, and there are numerous different organizations working towards this. I think that this support is going to be critical as not only protection for biodiversity, but also a way to connect people into these networks to move them forward in this direction. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Heather Amtower.
Hi, thank you so much. Heather Amtower, I live in Weymouth, Massachusetts, grew up in Medfield. As we plan conservation goals for biodiversity, I think it's crucial to consider the significant threat posed by invasive species to the biodiversity of Massachusetts. Invasive species can outcompete, displace, and lead to extinction of native species that are critical for maintaining that ecological balance and biodiversity that the Commission's looking for. Invasive species often possess traits that allow them to thrive and spread rapidly in new environments. These traits can include fast growth, high reproductive rates, and a lack of natural predators. Once introduced, they can alter habitats, reduce resources available to native species, and introduce diseases. This disruption can lead to the decline or extinction of native species, ultimately reducing biodiversity. A prominent example in Massachusetts is the tree of heaven. The invasive species has aggressively spread throughout the Commonwealth's coastal areas and highways. Its rapid growth and the ability to thrive in various environments have enabled it to dominate these areas, crowding out native plants. The tree of heaven is particularly concerning because it can alter the soil chemistry, making it even more difficult for the native species to reestablish. I think addressing the issues of invasive species requires a comprehensive and coordinated approach. And I'd propose that the Commonwealth should establish and enforce requirements for the removal and management of invasive species. This could include identification and monitoring, just implementing programs to identify and monitor the presence of them, regulation and enforcement, creating regulations that mandate the removal of invasive species from public and private lands. This could involve, developing guidelines for the safe and effective removal of the species, and ensuring that their disposal doesn't lead to the further spread. Restoration and rehabilitation once they are removed, encouraging the support of native habitats once the invasive species have been removed. It might involve planting those native species and managing the soil health to monitor the recovery of the ecosystem. I think obviously public awareness and education is important in making sure that there is that outreach. And by taking these steps, I think Massachusetts can work towards preserving its rich biodiversity and ensuring that native species have the opportunity to thrive. Combating these invasive species is a critical component to the conservation efforts and requires a collective government, community, and individual approach. Thank you.
Thank you. David Dow.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
I'm David Dow. I'm a retired marine scientist who lives on Cape Cod in the Wacoit Bay watershed. I wanted to comment on two items. The first was that as a result of climate change, we've had a large increase in the black sea bass population, which are voracious predators and influence the natural biota in our coastal embayments and waters. And so that they came as a surprise as a result of climate change. So that other species, as your previous speaker mentioned, invasive species might have to be addressed, even though they increase the biodiversity in the short run. The second thing was that in the watershed in which I reside, they're trying to restore bay scallops and river herring. And we need to get more support for local efforts to support recovery of these species, because it's not something that's going to be done successfully at large scale levels by state agencies. So for example, in the case of river herring, the local Wampanoag tribe proposes a right of nature campaign to restore the breeding habitats of river herring in watersheds on the upper Cape Cod. We should take advantage of these local endeavors that combined could allow these species to recover, be restored and recover as part of our natural environment. And I'll send in written comments to comment or to speak on these matters further. Thank you.
Thank you. Sandy Fosgate.
Hello, I live in Plymouth, Sandy Fosgate, and I support a number of the programs for biodiversity, and they're all very exciting, but here in Southeast Mass, we have an emergency. It's due to the fact that that our aquifer is made of angular sand, which is extremely commercially valuable. We are experiencing deforestation, removal of all vegetation and soil from land, and then the trekking away of millions of cubic yards of sand. I would be happy to give anyone a tour of the many sites around here. There are over 100. The one I am most concerned about right now is right on the border of Miles Standish State Forest. It is dropping the water table because it's actually removing the aquifer. And obviously not only is it taking away wildlife corridor and habitat for the very unusual species that we have here in the Pine Barrens, it's also changing the hydrology and reducing our sole source aquifer's capacity and making it more vulnerable to pollution, because the trees and plants and soil are what filter the water that goes into it. So it's very scary. It's horrifying to see. We don't seem to have any avenue for stopping this from happening. At least our local office of Mass DEP does not seem to have a problem with this. Legal challenges just keep going on, and we need help. We need legislation. We need moratorium. We need anything that anyone can do to please help us to stop all the precious biodiversity loss that is happening all around us every day. There are hundreds of trucks that are taking away the sand and everything above it all day long, day after day here. Thank you very much. And I'm happy for anyone to contact me and to provide them more information. If you look on Google Earth, you can see it happening in real time. Obviously with a little delay, but you can see that there are just massive areas that are now sandy, and then development.
Thank you, Sandy.
Thank you.
Thank you. Meg Sheehan?
Oh, thank you so much. I'm sorry that I signed in with that name. My name is Catherine Harrelson with Community Land and Water Coalition. I do share a Zoom account with Meg Sheehan, so that's probably why my name came up as such. My name is Catherine Harrelson. I'm with Community Land and Water Coalition. I'd like to thank the Commonwealth for taking on this initiative, and I support the comments of previous speakers. I have two questions to pose. The first one is, what sort of legal protections does this initiative carry? What sort of laws will come about as a result of this initiative? Is the Department of Fish and Wildlife going to increase legal protections for wildlife or animals in general as part of this executive order? Will animals have a right to exist? From my experience working to protect and preserve the land and waters of southeastern Massachusetts, it seems as though the only designations for wildlife habitat that carry legal protections are wetlands and wetland buffers, areas of critical environmental concern, Zone 2 wellhead protection areas, and NHESP estimated and priority habitat. Unfortunately, I have not yet to see a regulatory authority on the state or municipal level take any sort of guidance designation, such as Biomap 3, including core habitat, critical natural landscape, or prime forest, into consideration when making regulatory decisions about whether or not a development project can go through. These guidance documents are well-intentioned, but they do not carry legal weight. Also, we have many areas of land that do not fall into any of these protected or guidance categories on the map. Are we to say that these landscapes, which are teeming with wildlife, yet do not meet our narrow definitions of speciality, should not also be preserved? In short, what sort of additional legal protections for wildlife habitat will this initiative carry? And finally, the last part of my question is, I would like to point out that we have many well-intentioned initiatives in the state, and I'm sympathetic and supportive of all of them. However, this initiative seems to go directly up against other initiatives in the state, such as the need for more affordable housing and the need for renewable energy. In one town in southeastern Massachusetts alone, we're looking at development proposals for both solar and cluster residential development, which will raise 317 acres of pristine, untouched wildlife habitat. And so my final question is, how will this initiative work with and not against other similarly sympathetic initiatives in our state? Thank you.
Great, thank you, Catherine. Marcy Semenska.
Hi, my name is Marcy Semenska. I'm from Save Lexington Wildlife in Lexington, Massachusetts. I'm going to focus on rodenticide. If we want to ensure biodiversity in Massachusetts, then we need to talk about anticoagulant rodenticides. Due to the fact that these chemicals bioaccumulate, which leads to secondary poisoning, these chemicals are affecting animals up and down the food chain. Some examples of animals that are frequently affected by these secondary poisonings include raptors, fox, coyote, skunk, fisher, and more. With raptors, this includes peregrine falcons and bald eagles, both of which are on the MESA list. In the year 2022, 530,000 pounds of escars were put down in the state of Massachusetts. The pesticide board approves these chemicals and doesn't allow cities and towns to further restrict. So even though there are some cities and towns in Massachusetts that would like to restrict these chemicals and thus improve their biodiversity, they're not being allowed to do so. In the case of rodenticides, there are readily available alternatives, so this impact on wild animals is totally unnecessary. Massachusetts needs to work on reducing or eliminating the use of anticoagulant poisons and should start by prohibiting these chemicals on state-owned land. This can be done now. No need to wait for 2030. Thank you.
Thank you, Marcy. Bernice Morrissey.
Thank you. Yes, this is Bernice Morrissey from Bridgewater, Mass. And I have to say, I'm so glad I joined in because, myself and my neighbors have formed a little organization called Lake Nipponicket Association to protect the lake. We're right on a great pond called Lake Nipponicket. But everything everyone has said to date is on our checklist of how we're going to deal with this. Our problem right now is developers, and there's really it's a hard thing to hold them back when they put money out there and say, well, it's not a perennial stream, it's a wetland, because look, in that drought year we got it designated as a perennial, an intermittent stream. So, but all of it, even the engineers that present planning plans to the planning committees in towns across the state, they vary from one company to the next. But I also found the state organizations do too. Like one of the previous speakers said, where are the regulations that hold the line on a buffer zone is a buffer zone of this many feet, and there's no waivers granted to developers. So that word has to get to apply some consistencies between conservation committees and let them do their job throughout the Commonwealth, because from town to town it differs, just as from engineer. I listened to one engineer and he's like, well, we want to protect the vernal pool. I almost fell off my chair because we're fighting another developer who's like, they're burying vernal pools and they're hiding things and they're just despicable, cutting down trees and then saying, oops, sorry. So this is what you face. But I also feel, as far as regulatory goes, I'm really worried for all lakes, water sources, natural resources, biodiversity. And I do thank your staff, because we have had to count on the staff doing the biomapping. This is technical stuff, and we're up against engineers, and we're just a group of active citizens trying to do our best to hold the line, because the generation before us, they did get the area designated ACEC, but that people just say ho-hum to, it seems. So, and the other thing is the waterways. I would love to see Mass Environmental Police taken off the role of managing great ponds in Massachusetts. I know they do partner with Division of Fisheries and Wildlife and Public Access Board and everything, but you end up having friction between the environmental police and your local police to get any enforcement on the devastation that's happening on our lakes and ponds through boating. Like the boats that you could put a barge on this lake, it's only 354 acres and it's shallow. And we're seeing the effects.
Hey, Bernice.
Okay,
Sorry.
thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Amy Meltzer.
Hi, thank you. I'm Amy Meltzer. I'm on the steering committee of the Mass Pollinator Network, and I'm with Elders Climate Action. And I really appreciate this listening session and the focus on biodiversity. Supporting and restoring biodiversity in Massachusetts requires understanding how our local plants, insects, birds, and other species have evolved together over millions of years to have specialized interdependent relationships. 90% of insects need specific native plants as food for both adults and their offspring and can't survive without them. Most plants depend on specific insects to pollinate them to reproduce. This means that plants and trees imported from distant ecosystems do not support our local insect species. As Jen Ryan said earlier, the bird population in North America has decreased by almost 30% since 1970, a loss of almost 3 billion birds. A major cause of this decline are significant losses in our insect population. Birds need massive numbers of insects for food for adults and especially for their young. The main cause of insect decline is loss of habitat through conversion of natural habitat into lawns and into built landscapes, the destruction of natural habitat such as forests, and the conventional use of non-native plants. As others have said, our widespread use of pesticides also contributes significantly to insect and bird declines. Because insect and plant species are interdependent, and because insects are the basis of the food web for all species, supporting local biodiversity requires planting plants and trees native to our region, using landscape practices that protect species throughout their life cycles through the entire year, and by protecting our natural habitats. Our biodiversity conservation goals should include legislating, educating, and incentivizing the public, developers, and municipalities to prioritize the use of native trees and plants, to use ecological landscape practices, to educate landscape professionals in ecological land care, and to educate our children about the importance of protecting and restoring local species and ecosystems. Researchers, plant growers, landscapers, educators, and grassroots organizations around the state have started doing this work, and we would all be thrilled to receive support that would enable us to expand our efforts. Please continue to call on us to use our expertise to help guide the implementation of biodiversity conservation in Massachusetts. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. Betty Krikorian.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Great, thank you. This is I'm Betty Krikorian from Belmont and a member of Elders Climate Action, Massachusetts. I do appreciate very much this initiative and the opportunity to speak and hear other speakers. I think this goes to your green planning and design goal and echoes what some of the other speakers have said. Developers and builders usually cut down all the trees on property being developed. They do this because it's easier and it's cheaper for them, but as you know, it's environmentally destructive. I would like to see some sort of initiative to reach out to builders and developers, and architects, and the public to encourage protecting the trees or other land features on their projects that are going to be developed. In particular, I think that we need a lot of education of builders and developers and architects as well on the effect of cutting down the trees or of preserving them, and some incentives to help builders and architects undertake this little harder job of conserving woods and trees and natural features. Also, schools, churches, and their developers too could be encouraged and incentivized to preserve woods on their lands. Instead, we have the Dover Amendment, which helps them cut down woods and destroy natural areas, and towns can do very little about it. In addition, along with these incentives and education and the education related to it, I would also encourage that developers and architects and others be encouraged to plant native species when they do the landscaping on the developed properties. And Amy and others have spoken more eloquently about why that is so important. But I think some form of outreach and education to this big industry is an important thing to undertake. Thank you.
Thank you, Betty. Aranya Karigatam.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Good evening. I'm Aranya Karigatam, a co-founder of Appreciate Biodiversity, and I'm 17 years old. I enjoy taking walks in nature and love observing and photographing wildlife. I've learned from my observations that birds, arthropods, and other animals and plants and fungi are crucial components that have interconnected relationships with their environment to keep the ecosystem functioning. If any component is removed, the whole ecosystem will collapse. I'm very disappointed that throughout Massachusetts, forests are being destroyed for the construction of buildings, apartments, schools, and solar farms. Trees and understory are being destroyed. Rocks and soils are being blasted, eliminating all life that exists there. I tried to help save a beautiful forest in Wakefield, along with many other citizens. The forest had a great diversity of wildlife and plants, vernal pools, and rock outcrops. And I enjoyed walking in the forest. There were eastern whippoorwills, scarlet tanagers, American toads, and spring peepers. Despite our repeated urgings to the state agencies to protect the forest, our voices were ignored. Now the forest is decimated, and I will never see it again. This is happening with many other forests in Massachusetts. Each time, the state agencies refuse to listen to us. I'm very concerned that when I grow up, we'll be facing a climate and biodiversity crisis far worse than it is right now. I want to be able to walk in nature and listen to the songs of crickets, the trills of toads, and the calls of the wood thrush. I want to be able to see rock outcrops and the tiger beetles who reside there. The blackbill warblers travel over 3,000 miles to reach their nesting grounds. They need to stop over in forests along the way to rest and forage. If forests are destroyed, they'll have no place to go. I want to be able to see them on a branch next to me, and I want to hear their songs fill the forest. Each one of us needs to protect every single habitat, every single forest, no matter how big or small, to help biodiversity thrive. Please listen to our voices this time. Biodiversity. Please protect forests and other intact ecosystems for my generation and future generations. Thank you for letting me speak today. I will leave you with some voices from the forest.
Thank you. Thank you, Aranya. Arav Karigatam.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Eric Karigatam, also a co-founder of Appreciate Biodiversity, an organization dedicated to raising awareness about the importance of biodiversity and the crucial roles that they play in the ecosystem. You asked for a vision for nature in 2050. Well, at a minimum, there should be at least as much nature in 2050 as there is today. And that entails protecting every species and every habitat, not only rare species and rare habitats, but all species and all habitats. Biodiversity is important for numerous reasons. serving roles such as pollination, decomposition, soil aeration, and each species plays a revitalizing role in maintaining a healthy forest ecosystem. Well, not just that, biodiversity simply has a right to live. But we know that we have lost 3 billion birds since 1970. Did you know we have lost 41% of insect life in the last decade? It's simply because we are desecrating our forests and natural spaces and obnoxiously deleting habitats from the map. We need to stop this. It takes hundreds of years for a forest to grow and rejuvenate into a rich biodiversity haven. The state has a list of species of greatest conservation need, including species such as the wood thrush, scarlet tanager, Canada warbler, broad-winged hawk, and black and white warbler that depend on rich forested habitat. The only decent way to protect these species is to halt the logging and clearing of forests, their habitats. Compared to the rate of our development, these forests won't grow back in real time. Who benefits from these forests? Almost everyone. But who wants to bring down these forests? The builders, whose greed for power and money crushes their compassion and sympathy. An overwhelming majority of people would benefit from having any given forest left alone. To keep up with our vision for 2050, the state needs to consult, accept, and utilize the views of the public in their decision-making. For example, the Hanscom Field Expansion Project should be halted. All 4 cities surrounding it are in utter dismay of the plan. The preservation of a forest should be as much of a goal as education for all. Why can't our schools and educational institutions be cited to minimize environmental damage and do good for our planet, instead of to force us to pay for ludicrous luxury to quench the never-ending thirst of a builder? To keep up with our vision for 2050, we need to scrap the Dover Amendment and write new environment-focused laws without loopholes to deal with the catastrophic biodiversity loss of our time. The preservation of our forests should be treated as much of a goal as climate change mitigation. In order to keep up with our simple vision for 2050, we need to make sure that energy infrastructure is sited correctly and fix Bill S-2838. And for solar panels, that should not be on existing rich biodiverse forests. Why can't solar panels go on our over 1.5 million rooftops? To satisfy a simple request and absolutely innocuous vision for 2050, there needs to be at least as much nature then as there is now. We protect all of our forested lands and pass laws enabling all of the above requests and more. I'm going to see this passed along in the next few years.
Thank you, Arav. Thank you. Lynn May.
Hi. Thank you for holding this session. My name is Lynn Mann, and I live in Lunenburg, Mass. And I am with the Massachusetts Sierra Club Forest Protection Team. There is increasing evidence that we need more mature and old growth forests, not just old growth characteristics, as has been proposed in some places, to improve biodiversity. We have an opportunity with Massachusetts public forests to designate more forests to achieve mature and old growth status. And in this vein, the Massachusetts Sierra Club Forest Protection Team makes the following requests. First, we would like to increase the amount of state-owned land in permanent reserves. At a minimum, make all public forests in the Quabbin, Wachusett, and Ware watersheds permanent reserves with minimum human intervention. This means discontinuing the creation of young successional habitats, single species restorations, disease control with pesticides and burning, and tree removal and wood products extraction on public land. This will allow these forests to develop into old growth, develop corridors, and support ecosystems that flourish in those conditions. We'd also like to see the state conduct a comprehensive inventory on all state-owned lands of existing flora and fauna, including species that need older forests and woodlands, and not just in areas of young successional habitat. For all areas, note the defining characteristics and dates of prior management activities. If this is currently happening, which it looks like in some of the documents it might be, then please make this information readily available to the public, because we have a very hard time finding it. I also would like to ask the group to work with the DOER to ban clear-cutting land for renewable energy projects and use already disturbed landscapes instead. We should develop a plan whereby all state agencies that sponsor commercial logging projects to compare various management practices using non-managed areas or reserves as controls. Currently, a lot of these projects don't have any controls. And this should not just be a list of and this information should also be made readily available to the public. I also think that you should create a research and information webpage that includes all scientific literature used to inform state agencies' decisions. This should not just be a list of policy publications, but should include scientific peer-reviewed research. To increase transparency and increase trust in the public, demonstrate how public input is actually utilized in policy, strategic, and programmatic decision-making. This is a great forum, and I appreciate it. And you should sponsor at least one more public hearing, listening session prior to finalizing the biodiversity goals. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lynn. Ambrose Clausen.
Hi, my name's Ambrose Clausen. I live in the western part of Massachusetts. I work for the Conservation District, but I'm here representing myself. I've been really impressed by some of most of the other comments that have been made in this listening session. I'm grateful for everyone who has come here tonight to speak out. Land conversion is my top priority tonight. Most of the houses in my neighborhood and in my community sit empty, heated and cooled year-round with fossil fuels, without any occupants, except for 2 or 3 weeks out of the year. Meanwhile, farmers and low-income workers leave the area because they can't find housing. This is a crisis of our farming community and our conservation efforts. Those most affected by the climate crisis are our farmers and working people. Community members who live here full-time are the ones who have the most interaction and enjoyment of our environment, and their buy-in is essential. Luxury housing sprawl endangers our environment and our food production. Gentrification and artificial land value increases have put many farmers and families out of business and out of options. Fighting against corporate greed and private money is an impossible task unless we are helped by our local and state government bodies. We need your guidance and help to stay living in our communities and continue to build strong movements to protect our environment. Hand in hand with gentrification and corporate extraction is the excessive use of synthetic fertilizers, pesticides, herbicides, and other poisons like the rodenticides, which have been mentioned. Also to add that the ecosystem services we rely on for survival cannot be duplicated by technology. I don't believe that we are going to technology our way out of this climate crisis. And I think the state should take a clear stance on this, that building strong community support behind our efforts will make them successful. The companies who profit from degrading our environment need to be held accountable. If a product can't be biodegraded, it should not be sold in 2024 or beyond. It should be the responsibility of the manufacturer, not the municipality or individual, to recycle or find a way of disposing of the product. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambrose. Janet Sinclair.
Yes, thank you. Hi, my name is Janet Sinclair. I live in Shelburne Falls. I gotta say, I love your music. It makes me feel like I'm going to be accepting an Academy Award. I guess you did that on purpose. I just wanted to mention something about the Climate Forestry Commission report, which I'm sure you've seen. The report was mostly supposed to be about You know about that, right? The report was supposed to be focused on climate-related issues with forest and forest policy. But really, there's a lot in there about biodiversity. And I just wanted to wonder, like, we have scientists who were on that committee or commission and talked about, and actually wrote a separate paper for you about these stuff like the Pine Barrens restoration. I live near Montague. I live near the Montague Plains. It's really very disturbing to me, that restoration project. I don't think there's any scientific basis for it. Our esteemed scientists don't think so either. And also I know that the logging is, these restorations are going on in Miles Standish, which is a reserve area. And of course, this is all being promoted and planned by, your agencies. So I'm wondering, how it is that these independent scientists who are outside of your agency don't seem to be listened to or even consulted. And it feels like a kind of internal kind of process for you when you evaluate things, just with your own staff. So I find that to be very disturbing. Also, the goals of 30 by 30, the big goals for 30 by 30 were really meant to be 30% of land and water to be left undisturbed by people, not just no parking lots or no Walmarts put on them. So another thing that I wanted to mention, thank you so much for the person that talked about stocking the rivers. I just appreciate that so much. I think it's just kind of crazy that we would be, stocking our public waterways with fish that don't live here and just degrade and die. And also my pet peeve right now is how our road crews are really having terrible impacts on our wetlands areas. It's happening on my property in my town. I hear from the wetlands specialists that I work with that some of the worst effects on our wetlands are coming from our road crews who are simply not trained to know even what a wetlands is or where they are or what to do with them. I think that there should be a huge concerted effort on your part to train. Thank you for my award. I'm glad I won.
Yes, thank you, Janet. There's your award.
Yeah, thank you.
I see Catherine Harrelson again. I'm wondering, is this one Meg?
Yes, this is Meg. Sorry for the confusion.
Okay, great.
Yes, thank you for the opportunity to speak, and thank you for putting this together and having a conversation about biodiversity. As many speakers have said, it is really hard for a lot of us from Southeastern Mass to see these pictures of the great biodiversity, including the turtles, etc., all while knowing that it's being hauled away by hundreds of truckloads a day that are strip mining the Atlantic coastal pine barrens. Over a year ago, we met with EEA officials to ask for your help in protecting the pine barrens, the wetlands, the waterways that have habitat for all this biodiversity. I've worked on this issue for my entire career for over 40 years, back with Henry Woolsey and Jen and so forth. And we put out report after report, the Vision 2020, knowing that our region was going to be overrun with development. And instead of having the sense that our state agencies and our environmental leadership has our back, we feel like we are fighting with our agencies to try to get them to enforce the law. It's really, really discouraging. We just see business as usual. We see that despite our meeting last year with EEA, where we laid all this out, including the role of the cranberry industry in the strip mining that's happening under the ruse of agriculture, in this last year, we've seen hundreds of acres just be completely obliterated. And there's no biological study, no MIPA review. The take permits that Natural Heritage is issuing are all based on the false pretense that a lot of this is cranberry agriculture, where out on a site visit this week, we see endangered species habitat, federally endangered turtle habitat being hauled off by the truckload. Biomap 3 just shrinks and shrinks the areas subject to protection. We have the Indian Pond site in Plymouth that was in Kingston that was suddenly removed from Biomap 3 and is now slated for a 25-acre strip mine. We have environmental justice neighborhoods who would love to learn more about biodiversity and who we're trying to educate about biodiversity, but how can they do that when the forest right up to their backyard is being clear cut and strip mined and permanently removed? They will never ever have the chance to experience a biodiverse pine barrens forest or wetlands out of their in their backyard. This is really tragic. We need more than an executive order. We need money. We need a change of mindset.
All right. Thank you so much, Meg.
Thank you.
Okay. Mary Dormer. Mary, are you still with us? Mary Dormer?
Yes, sorry.
Great.
Can you guys hear me?
We can hear you now, yes.
Oh, great. Okay, thank you. Can you guys hear me?
Yes,
Can
yes.
Oh, okay.
Yes,
All right.
we hear you.
Okay. So my name is Mary Dormer. I live in Carver, and I'm just going to speak on the devastation that I see here. I started a group called Carver Concerned Citizens to try and fight the big batteries and all the dual use solar. And I have lived in this town for 7 years. And when I got here, it was just beautiful land. I go down Federal Road now, and it's like I'm driving through the Sahara Desert. It is disgraceful what these predatory companies have done. Nobody's growing cranberries. There's no money in cranberries. They're hauling sand out. We have gone to the DEP. We have gone to Maura Healey. We have invited them down to see, and nobody is doing anything. And you need to do it because we're on a sole source aquifer here, and we have a right to safe water, and our water is not safe. Something has to be done. Somebody needs to step up and say, we're going to stop this. We're going to investigate this, and we're going to put an end to it. We're never going to get those forests back. Never. They're never going to grow because the sand has been removed. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Mary. Artie, if you would like to speak.
Sure. Thank you very much. No, I appreciate it. I threw some stuff into the chat, but I suppose I'll just read what I wrote here. Yeah. So again, my name's Artie Crocker. I'm a number of things through life. One thing is I'm a solar engineer, but I'm also a former member of the Conservation Commission in the town of Needham, and I am a current member of the Planning Board. One thing that's been greatly of concern to me is, especially in our town, I suppose, in lots of parts of Mass as well, and that is the lack of understanding of the benefit of trees. I know I'm speaking to probably the choir here, but I'll put it out there anyway. And that is, I mean, we value, it seems, I say to use the word V, but it seems like the short-term economic value of cutting a tree down and putting up a large house takes precedent over, I think, what we should be valuing, and that is what the trees do for us in life. I mean, they clean the water through their transpiration, through the cycle of life, water back into the air. They reduce flood risks. They decrease the heat deserts. The whole value of de-stressing us as we go through life, having trees around us. And I would like to see the state enact something to make it harder for trees to simply be cut down. Now, I know that perhaps there are some things in there, and our town is starting to look at something for, let's say, a tree policy. So we can't just, and developers can't just clear cut a lot and put up a new house without some understanding ramifications of something as far as the value of the existing trees on the lot. I know I missed a lot of what was being talked here on this forum going on, and I apologize for that. But I was made aware of this, and I just like to get it out there that even though I am in the solar industry, I am in it for the sheer purpose of we have to do something for our environment to make it more resilient, to reduce fossil fuel use. And you would think there would be the contradiction of, well, we have to cut trees down to make solar viable. Well, I suppose sometimes the trees coming down, if there's a huge benefit to it, but for the most part, there's so many places we can have solar panels. There are so many roofs available. There are so many parking lots available. There's so many businesses available. So, so my advocacy is save the trees. It's just really as simple as that. We need to save our trees, save the community, and as part of it, it's the diversification of demographics in town. That's part of it as well. But in some ways, it's all part of the whole. We're saving our environment, and in doing that, we are also saving some of our diversity within ourselves. We talk about diversity, the biodiversity. It's also the biodiversity within our own demographics and who we are as a population. So I thank you very much. I know my time is up. Again, Artie Crocker, I appreciate the time, and thank you so much.
Thanks, Artie. Lara Wall.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Hi, my name's Laura Wall from Shrewsbury, Massachusetts. So
Lara, we're actually having a little difficulty hearing
the
you.
biodiversity, if they and Wendell, and there's a lot. How's that? Is that better? Hello?
Yeah,
Can
is
you
there
hear
a
me
way is there a way to speak a little closer to the microphone?
Can you hear me better now?
Yes, that's much better. Thank you.
So the towns of Shrewsbury and Wendell border the Quabbin, and there's a lot of towns out here. And when you look at the map that was actually released by your own administration, you can see that the carbon stocks in this area are so high and valuable. And we have one of the largest Massachusetts landowners, Coles, and their outrageous proposal in the town of Shrewsbury alone, destroying wages. And the fact that the Dover Amendment is being used for this is just something that the administration should do something about, because this is the main point right here. Massachusetts prides itself in being progressive in this country. We are setting a standard of how to shift to renewable energy, which I applaud, but we cannot attain it by any means possible. It needs to be done carefully, because we are setting the standard for so many other states that might not be thinking about the trees and biodiversity. What kind of a message and a standard is that setting if we as Massachusetts don't do something in our progressiveness to set the standard? We have an opportunity to create incentives for rooftop parking lots, as so many people have said. There's an easy way to do it. The Biden administration just awarded through the EPA millions of dollars for this initiative advantage. I know we can do this, and we can preserve our forests and set an example in the entire country. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Lara. You were breaking up a bit, but I think we captured most of it. Gloria Kegels.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear
Thank
you.
you. Hi, I'm Gloria Keglis. I live in Wendell, Massachusetts. It's a very small town of 900 people. Most of what lives here is forests. Over 50%, maybe up to 90% of our town is forested with mature trees. And yet our state is considering placing a standalone battery energy storage system right in the middle of our town, on top of our best aquifer, surrounded by forests, completely surrounded by forests. As we know from New York State and California, these battery systems, nicknamed BESS, B-E-S-S, are exploding pretty frequently, catching on fire. They cannot be put out. They can only be controlled. They can burn for weeks and weeks. And to place something like this in the middle of Wendell State Forest area and the biggest Massachusetts Audubon sanctuary in Massachusetts is complete insanity. And on top of that, such a small town as we have no municipal water supply. We have no way of even controlling such a fire. So this is just a really extreme example of what our state is trying to do to us, the people. And then on top of that, we have this new alternative energy bill that's running through the legislature, which is designed specifically to take away what's called home rule, so that small towns or any towns cannot determine what's best for our town, what's not good for our town, what might destroy our whole town and forest, what might destroy our aquifers. So we need to change the whole the direction of what our state is doing. It's insanity, and people are very upset all across the whole state. And yet we seem to have no control of what the legislature is doing to us. Another interesting thing that just came out is that these gigantic industrial-sized battery systems, standalone, not connected to solar power, contain not only lithium ion phosphate, but now they've just found that they contain PFAS, the forever chemicals that are polluting the whole planet and are found in every living person and
Thank you, Gloria. So we are here at 8 o'clock. We have at least one comment left to go. So we're gonna, Lenore, come to you, but just to note for those of you who might need to sign off, to feel free to use this, the website that you see on your screen for any written comments. But Lenore, let's take your comment before we close. Lenore?
Sorry, it took a while for the unmute to come up. It wasn't. Sorry about that.
No
Okay.
problem.
Yeah, and I will send written comments also, but and I should just identify myself. My name is Lenore Brick. I live in Western Mass in Amherst. I'm the co-founder of the Regenerative Farming, Forests, and Food Systems branch of Climate Action Now. And there's a inherent, somewhat perceived dichotomy just even in the name that I just said, in that it seems crazy, but it is so that people in climate advocacy and people in biodiversity advocacy are sometimes at odds with each other. And so I want to point out and urge the administration to look at these conflicts head on, and deal with them by collaborating and coordinating across state agencies, across the region, and across governmental branches, as you have been hearing about how legislation, for instance, the climate bill is trying to put forth some important technology, but man-made technology can't replace natural technology. And why do they need to be at odds with each other? Why do we have to have solar development on top of forests? Why do we have to have the Dover Amendment taking away our home rule? So now we have a conflict between town and state. And all of these conflicts between business and environment, we need to look at those and be strategic about how to resolve these conflicts and how to anchor our actions guided by principles where, asking, how can we humans meet our needs, not our whims, but our needs, that is in line with natural processes on which we and all beings depend on. That's what's always regulated the climate. That's what's always maintained the biodiversity. And it's just our disconnect with ourselves, with each other, with nature that has put us into this place. So I just want to, I know it's feeling like an impossible task, but we have to meet the impossible at this moment, because otherwise we will be living the impossible. And I also want to highlight that we can't just think of biodiversity conservation. We have to think of biodiversity regeneration. For instance, the biodiversity that we can't see, not just the pretty creatures you're seeing on the screen, but the ones that we can't see under the soil, that is the basis for all of these other creatures that we can see. And the regeneration, like agroforestry, can be a wonderful thing for the state to support. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Lenore. And thank you so much to all of our attendees, those who spoke, those who listened. I'm going to pass this back over to Jen for any final remarks.
Thank you, Stacy. I just want to say thank you to everyone for your excellent comments, and we look forward to your written comments as well. And thank you to the entire team at DFG and many other state agencies and folks that have given us ideas and suggestions and work with us to get this far. So thank you again, everyone, and have a wonderful evening.